Man, I don't know what everyone is talking about when they're saying that Sonic is currently within a drought. 2020 has been one of the best years to be a Sonic fan. There's been so much content throughout the community, I just don't get this idea that Sonic has not been doing a good job as a franchise lately. I mean, look at what we've had. We just had a very successful Sonic the Hedgehog movie that even managed to defeat, get this, the MCU. Yes, Sonic the Hedgehog has defeated the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, only Sonic could accomplish a feat of this magnitude. And then we have a game such as Team Sonic Racing, a game that everyone is talking about on Twitter and totally didn't forget about in a few days. Like, this game has been amazing and it will hold us over for so long till the next mainline installment. I don't know what people are talking about when they're saying Sonic's games are on a downward spiral. I mean, ridiculous. And then we have the Sonic comics. Oh my god, the Sonic the Hedgehog IDW comics are amazing right now. They just have these really interesting storylines that really do a good job of handling the characters and are totally not boring because they're just throwing a bunch of characters all around without any actual interesting storyline going on. Like, I don't know what people are talking about when they're saying the comics don't mean anything, because the comics have been doing a great job. And then we have the merchandise. Man, oh man. If Sonic was truly a dead franchise, would he have merchandise? Like, look at all this cool Sonic merch we're getting. We're getting Sonic the Hedgehog chopsticks. We're getting Sonic the Hedgehog G Fuel. Like, there's just so much here, I can't even process it. And then, oh, aside from Team Sonic Racing, people keep saying, Sonic hasn't had any good games lately. Check this out. Sonic the Hedgehog in Ninjala. I'm not kidding you. Sonic the Hedgehog in Ninjala. It's mind-blowing. Like, Sonic the Hedgehog starring in another video game that wasn't made by him, in order to accommodate for bad sales of his games. Like, what? What is this crazy idea you're all suggesting? And if that wasn't enough for you, Sonic the Hedgehog in Fall Guys. Yes, that is right. Sonic the Hedgehog in the immensely popular Fall Guys. So for those of you who are saying Sonic the Hedgehog hasn't been in a popular game lately, suck it. That's all I can say. And finally, I gotta bring out the big guns. The Sonic the Hedgehog social media. Look at the amount of followers the Sonic Twitter has. This Twitter has gained so many followers over the last few years that I honestly find it baffling that people say that Sonic hasn't been improving as a franchise lately. It's just, man oh man. Praise be our Lord and Savior, the Sonic, because he has just blessed us with so much content and let's get into the video. Hey everyone, it's Nux, and now that I'm done with my obvious kidding around, let's get to the real point of this video, let's cut the BS and just get straight to it. So, it's no secret that right now, the current state of Sonic has been dry. We are indeed in a drought. No, we are not in this glorious period of Sonic just because things like the Sonic movie exists or merchandise exists. Like, despite what fans will tell you, yes, we are indeed in a bit of a drought for Sonic right now. And does this sound a bit familiar to you all? It should, because this is not the first time that we've been in a drought with Sonic the Hedgehog. We've had multiple little dry periods with this series, and this isn't even the first time I've made a video on a dry period of Sonic. So yeah, we're not exactly breaking new ground. This video is going to sound a bit repetitive and similar to some past videos because, well, I'm going to be repeating a lot of the stuff I've been saying for years now, and it's just getting really tiring, and it's stuff like that that's why I don't want to talk about Sonic the Hedgehog all the time, because it's starting to get really repetitive and really annoying. Like whenever I have to come and make a video for this franchise, it just doesn't feel the same as it used to, man. Like, ugh. But what I want to talk about today is why the current state of Sonic the Hedgehog feels more emptier than usual. Like, the current state of this series, if there's one word I have to use to describe it right now, that word would be empty. And what I'm going to do is talk about why the Sonic series feels so empty despite being an ongoing franchise, and why going into the 30th anniversary, I don't think things will 100% get better. You know, Sega could reveal a big new game that totally brings life back into the community, but I just have a feeling that multiple factors will basically screw us over. So let's go ahead and get into it. So this year was clearly supposed to be a big year for Sonic. One of the main things they were hyping up and really pushing this year was the Sonic movie. And before I get to the Sonic movie, we need to talk about the state of the video game franchise, because in case any of you Sonic fans have forgotten, Sonic the Hedgehog is first and foremost a video game franchise. And when it comes to being a video game franchise, Sonic has just been insanely dry. For starters, originally we were supposed to have this thing to where the 20th of every month we were going to get Sonic news. Like Sega made this promise, like, oh, the 20th of every month you're going to get big Sonic news. So I was like, oh, well maybe they'll do all sorts of little smaller announcements in months like January and February. They'll announce something like a port of a classic old Sonic game, or they'll announce some cool Sonic the Hedgehog themed content that we'll be able to play, or maybe, just maybe, we'll get a side game that'll hold us over until we get to the next big Sonic game. And maybe in November, December, or somewhere around that period, we'll get the reveal of the next big Sonic game. So when they said that they were going to have an announcement the 20th of every month, that's where my mindset was, you know. But I should have known better, because this is Sega and Sonic Team we're talking about. The 20th of every month thing was basically garbage. For starters, they only really stuck to it for the first few months. And it was a bunch of small things like, oh, we're gonna port Sonic 1 and Sonic 2 again. Like, we haven't seen a million ports of those games before. And on top of that, they even promised that we were going to have this cool South by Southwest panel, but obviously due to a certain unnamed virus, that didn't happen. Now, you could blame Sonic's current dry state on the certain unnamed virus. Like, it's so easy to say that, oh, well, the virus canceled everything, so Sega had to push their plans back. Yes, but here's the thing. The Sonic Twitter made a tweet saying that they were going to follow up with that IDW information in a future online event. Like, they were going to follow up with it in a new event that was strictly online. Like, it would be understandable that they pushed the info back because of the virus, but they never really followed up on it. So because of that, we kind of were just left in this dry limbo where we got no type of news whatsoever. We kind of just had to deal with these smaller things like merchandise and all the stuff I talked about in the beginning. And that is one of the major reasons why Sonic the Hedgehog has felt extremely dry this year. Again, Sonic the Hedgehog is a video game franchise, and when it comes to really motivating people to care about his main front, they have not done a good job. But of course, this being the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise, even if you point out the fact that Sega has clearly not done a good job with making this series feel that interesting, the fans will come to their defense and say, but oh, the virus, and oh, don't worry, Sega will do something big later, and oh, but wait, we have this minor thing, we have this thing to hold us over. And this period of time, more than any other period, has driven me insane. Like, fanboys do not understand how irrelevant Sonic the Hedgehog feels right now. That's how the series looks, in most people's eyes right now. The series looks extremely irrelevant. Don't believe me? A big example is this tweet I'm gonna put on the screen right here. So this tweet right here compares Sonic to Mario and Crash. And what it does is it completely trashes Sonic. It treats him like he hasn't had a good game in decades, which, but it's so funny that they use Mario Odyssey for Mario's front because it's funny. Sonic had a good game the same year Odyssey came out with Sonic Mania. But despite Sonic Mania's existence, people don't consider Mania as a big game that's full competition to Odyssey. And even with, Crash 4, again, with Crash 4 coming out recently, people see Crash as doing better than Sonic, which is so fascinating to me because Crash has been an inactive franchise for so long, but now it's just recently made this big comeback with the remakes, with its really good racing game, and now with Crash 4. Like, it's just crazy how people consider Mario better than Sonic, even though Sonic did have a good game the same year that Mario had a great game. And now even Crash is considered better than Sonic. Now, why is this? Why is it that despite a game like Mania existing, people consider Mario and Crash as doing better? And I will explain it as calmly as I can explain this. The reason why people see Sonic as irrelevant compared to Mario and Crash is that's just how he's felt. Yes, he had a good game with Sonic Mania, but let's face it, Sonic Mania does not stack up to the same level as Super Mario Odyssey and Crash 4. Sonic Mania was a classic-based game that mostly was made up of remixed levels. Yes, it's a great game, but it was never something that was going to be the pinnacle of Sonic the Hedgehog content. It wasn't something that was supposed to be the main meal. It was something that was supposed to be a side course. And that is the reason why Mania is not holding the attention of people. Yes, it's holding the attention of maybe Sonic fans, of course. Sonic fans will never stop talking about Sonic Mania. But when it comes to people who just don't care about Sonic, it feels like they've done nothing in ages. You know what was supposed to be the big Sonic game that was supposed to feed the mainstream fans? Sonic Forces. And how did that game turn out? Need I say more? It's just that Sonic the Hedgehog has not felt like a relevant franchise in the eyes of these people for so long. And honestly, I can't blame them. Sonic has done nothing interesting since 2017, and that's the reason why he feels so dry. Despite having things like the comics, the merchandise, he just feels so irrelevant. And no matter how much Sega tries to ignore that Sonic Forces ever happened and tries to shove classic Sonic and Mania down our throats as if it was the last big game, it just doesn't hide the fact that Forces was supposed to be the last big game. Like, Sega cannot hide that fact. Forces was the game that had all that development time into it and was supposed to be our main meal, but because it basically flopped, we have to change it and say that Mania was our last big game. And what was Mania? It was a 2D Sonic game that was mostly made up of old levels that we've already played. Like, no matter how great the game is, you just cannot deny that fact. Alright, and that's one of the reasons why Sonic has felt dry on the mainline front. But next, I want to talk about the Sonic the Hedgehog movie and why, despite it existing, the series still feels dry. Now, you would think Sonic having this big movie, like that alone, would make him a big talking point all throughout the year. And it has been mentioned quite a bit, being one of the last movies that we were able to even see in cinemas, that pretty much made Sonic a lot more relevant than usual. But I just don't understand why fans think that just because this movie exists, that Sonic is back, baby. Like, yeah, the movie did okay and passable in sales, but that's about it. It didn't break any insane records. Like, some people tried to say that, it toppled the video game movie record, which in like pacing it did. but it's still not the highest grossing video game movie ever. Like, that was a lie. The highest grossing video game movie ever is, I'm pretty sure, Detective Pikachu. Like, hold on, let me double check this. Yep, it says here that Detective Pikachu is one of the highest grossing video game movies and pretty much has the crown right now. Funny enough, it was freaking Warcraft that had the crown, I think, but yeah. Sonic did not come for that top spot at all. Yes, he broke records in speed, but that's about it. Especially with, you know, coming in and closing theaters, it pretty much cut off the amount of money that Sonic could have made. Maybe Sonic could have surpassed those movies if he had the full opportunity to, but yeah, it's clear that the Sonic movie is not this amazing thing that destroyed the industry or whatever. One of the funniest things that happened on Twitter that Sonic fans, you know, tried to gas up was the fact that Sonic was apparently the highest grossing superhero movie, which first of all is hilarious to me because they really tried to pass Sonic off as a superhero, which just superhero is not the genre I would put Sonic in. Like, that's not what Sonic is. Like, yeah, he's a hero character, but he is not a superhero. Stop kidding yourself, Sonic fans. And because of this, some articles tried to make it out as Sonic being the highest grossing superhero movie, like, period. Like, it beat anything it rivaled, which is funny because there weren't even really any superhero movies that released this year. So they're trying to play it off as if Sonic defeated Marvel and DC, and some Sonic fans took this seriously, as if Sonic actually went toe-to-toe with an actual Marvel movie and won, which I find absolutely hilarious. The Sonic movie's sales literally do not even rival a quarter of the MCU's sales as a franchise, and people seriously think that Sonic managed to defeat the MCU. That is hilarious to me. Heck, some people think that because of this, Sonic as a franchise or even a cinematic universe will actually be able to defeat Marvel as a whole, which I find even extra hilarious. You seriously think a cinematic universe based on Sonic movies and Sega IPs like freaking, I don't know, Super Monkey Ball or freaking Crazy Taxi is going to defeat the MCU? The MCU, one of the highest grossing franchises ever because it has movies like Endgame, which made billions. What are you doing, Sonic fans? I just don't get it. I'm not even going to linger on that. It just hurts the process. So my point is just that despite Sonic having a big cinematic movie for the first time, it just doesn't make things any better. Like, yeah, the Sonic movie still gets talked about a little bit because it was one of the last movies that was in cinemas before the virus, but despite that, it just feels kind of forgotten. You know, the movie was very forgettable because of its generic elements. It had some elements that were cool, that really did Sonic justice, but besides that, it just overall felt like it just passed by. So the next thing I want to talk about is I want to dive more into this whole Sonic merchandise and tie-in thing, and why, despite Sonic the Hedgehog getting merchandise and tie-ins, it is not a substitute for actual content. And this includes stuff like the IDW comics, the tie-ins to the popular games, and the other little irrelevant merchandise things like the chopsticks or whatever. Like, things like that should be smaller announcements that build up to bigger ones. Like stuff like chopsticks and G4, I'm obviously fine with. I'm not mad that those things exist, but I am mad that fans are trying to pass it off as Sonic the Hedgehog doing great, because just because Sonic the Hedgehog has things happening doesn't mean that Sonic is in a healthy position per se. Now, getting into the comics specifically, the comics are probably the most overrated thing about Sonic right now, because they just feel extremely boring. Like, people keep saying the storylines of the comics are very interesting, but it kind of just feels like the comics don't have a story that's all that great. There was the whole 𝗵𝗿𝗲𝗁𝗱 storyline where apparently people were getting turned into weird metal zombies or whatever, and maybe that had some interesting moments. But besides that, it's mostly just been random moments like the Deadly Six appearing out of nowhere and fighting Sonic and Co. for no reason. Like, IDW is just so weird that it's really hard for me to say that it's this great substitute for actual game content. So in conclusion, I think that IDW is just an uninteresting shell of what Archie left behind, and it just exists. Like, yeah, there's some interesting elements about it because of like the references and throwbacks, but besides that, it just is not this thing that is substitute for actual content, which is the same thing I'll say for pretty much all the merchandise and tie-in stuff. Like Sonic the Hedgehog and Fall Guys, cool. Like Sonic has a little cute costume in Fall Guys, but that is, again, that is not substitute for getting actual interesting Sonic the Hedgehog content that is unique to the series. Now I'm going to get back to the game front and rant more about that, but first I want to talk about another thing that the fans say is usually a good substitute for content, and that is the Sonic the Hedgehog social media. People usually love to say that the Sonic social media is great and that the dank memes and amazing posts that it, uploads is great substitute for actual content. And it's funny to me because what was once, something that was considered this great pillar of Sonic and was all oh so amazing, just kind of feels there now. In case you didn't know, one of the people who was responsible for the growth of the Sonic social media was a little fella named Aaron Webber. Aaron Webber was a big part of evolving the Sonic Twitter into what it became, and my relationship with Aaron Webber was very mixed because you all know I didn't really like how he focused on making Sonic more memey when it came to his social media. Like, I like the idea of making Sonic, a little more interactive with the fans, but I hate the idea of things such as endless Big the Cat jokes. But yeah, Aaron Webber actually ended up leaving his social media position and has now moved somewhere else within Sega. So now it's been taken over by someone completely new, which I don't know who runs it right now. But to say that they've made the Sonic social media even better would be a flat out lie. Because if anything, the social media just kind of feels more random at this point. Like, some of the posts it makes just don't make any sense to me. Like, it's not even memes at this point, it's just kind of random things happening on it. So fans saying that is a good substitute for content, it's just bizarre to me, if anything. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that up briefly. Alright, so let's turn things back around to the game front. What is another reason that the game front has felt dry and empty lately? I already talked about why Mania and Forces didn't really do much in terms of making people care about Sonic again, but what about the spin-offs, for example? Has Sonic had really good and interesting side projects and spin-off games? No. One of the last Sonic games we got was a game called Team Sonic Racing. You might not remember because the game kind of just came and went, but Team Sonic Racing was a game that existed. And well, Team Sonic Racing was not a great game at all. Between having a very broken online system, between having a very terrible story, between having a boring roster, boring selection of tracks, like, yeah, it had some decent music, but besides that, Team Sonic Racing just did not have enough substance to rival games like Crash Team Racing or Mario Kart. Team Sonic Racing was just a game that existed and kind of just came and went. So that definitely wasn't good content to hold us over until the next mainline game. And then we have stuff like Mario and Sonic at the Olympics, which, what do I even have to say here? Like, why does this sub-series still exist? Sonic side projects just don't feel interesting anymore. Yeah, Sonic spin-offs have never been the greatest thing ever, which is why we've put more of a focus on the mainline games, if anything. But remember when 2D Sonic used to get its own little side games that would be great holdover into the next big 3D game? Like, remember the Sonic Advance games or the Sonic Rush games, which were actually fully new games with new ideas and didn't just recycle zones because they were too lazy to allow the team to actually make new ones, stuff like that. And when you look at series like Crash and Mario right now, they have much better momentum. Like, Mario has all types of spin-off games like freaking Super Mario Maker or Mario 35 or the Mario 3D All-Stars ports. Like, Mario has all sorts of content right now, and that's not even getting into his spin-offs like Mario Party and stuff. Like, that's not even getting into his spin-offs. Mario has so much substance. And look at Crash right now. Again, I already mentioned how much more interesting Crash looks between having remakes, a great racing game, and now a full new original game with Crash 4. Like, it's just amazing how Sonic, a series that was once a king of doing stuff like this, has just fallen. And that is one of the reasons why Sonic the Hedgehog has just felt more empty lately. You know, despite having things that are ongoing, it just doesn't stack up to Mario or Crash that actually has content on their main front. And so before I get to, my final point, which is going to talk about more the 30th anniversary, I want to talk about why it is important that we get actual content, why we get stuff like actual interesting side games or actual content with some meat on it. The reason why content like that is important is it fuels the community. It fuels the drive to care about the series. Over the last few years, ever since 2017, you've just seen less and less people really care much about Sonic. And fans have tried to make you care about Sonic with stuff like fan games or the stuff I've mentioned a million times already, the merchandise, tie-in stuff, but that stuff just doesn't have substance. Like, who cares you can get a Sonic the Hedgehog costume in Fall Guys? Who cares that freaking Sonic the Hedgehog chopsticks exist? And I'm gonna say it, who cares about the freaking comics? I mean, obviously people care about the comics, they exist, but in terms of actually fueling the community, it's clearly not doing a good job because these fans are bored out of their minds, clearly. They're doing their best to really make it seem like Sonic is an active franchise right now, but it just isn't working. You cannot hide the fact that fans are bored and need something with actual substance to it right now. And it just really shows throughout the community right now that Sonic is just not an interesting franchise. We've seen all sorts of people who used to be really prominent in the community and used to make it feel so much more interesting just leave off because Sonic is just not that interesting. Or we've seen people go to whole different franchises because they have more content. Like, again, Crash right now has more content than Sonic. And that is amazing to me because Crash just felt much more irrelevant than Sonic at a certain point. But now here we are, Crash has overtaken Sonic as one of the top video game franchises ever for whatever reason, and stuff like that is one of the reasons why I just feel so empty with Sonic the Hedgehog. And now we get to my final point, which is covering, why I think that this drought and this silence does not mean good things for the 30th anniversary. Now, Sonic fans have pulled this card multiple times. They've said that, things are only quiet because Sega is giving it their all for the next big Sonic game. They've pulled this crap so many times. Remember the droughts leading up to Sonic Forces and how we said that it was going to be so quiet because Sega was putting all their time into the next big Sonic game, but really they were putting time into this engine and it didn't turn out looking that great, and they just kind of rushed Forces despite having all that time. Like, you can't pull the time card anymore. I don't understand why people have so much faith in Sega and Sonic Team when they've proven time and time again that they are not this amazing team that they once were. And people will point to Sonic Mania, but they seem to love to forget that Sonic Mania was not made by Sega and Sonic Team. It was made by a devoted group of fans who somehow understand 2D Sonic better than Sonic Team right now, which is just absolutely embarrassing. But Sega sure as hell loves to hide that fact, don't they? Ugh. And we've still not seen any signs of Sonic Team really even building up and gearing up for this game. Like, you would think we would hear things like hirings or something, but no. And that's just so bizarre to me, considering the fact that one of the big things we learned around the period of Sonic Forces is that the team who used to work on the Boost games like Sonic Unleashed and Sonic Colors, are gone. So you would think that Sonic Team would be stocking up on developers to make this next big Sonic game, but we've seen no signs of that. Compare this to a game like Metroid Prime 4. Now, Metroid Prime 4 has its own problems because it's been in development hell for the longest time, but one of the reasons we know that Metroid Prime 4 is still in a healthy position right now is that they are hiring for that game. They are building up resources for that game. So despite Metroid Prime 4 being in development hell, we at least know that game is in a somewhat good position right now. But with Sonic Team, we've just seen no signs of them really trying to get it together. And especially with this year and how they've handled this drought and how they've really done nothing to quell our fears, it just makes me less and less confident in them for the 30th anniversary. So between going into the 30th anniversary with uneasy feelings, and between Sonic not really doing anything interesting since his last mainline game, that is the reason why I think that Sonic the Hedgehog right now is in an empty state. Yes, it clearly is still getting content, quote unquote. It's still doing things and is thus active technically, but I think that fans are really overly gassing up how interesting the franchise has been lately. And every time I see Sonic fans try and defend the series or crap on other series and act like they're still in the best position right now, I get very annoyed, because it's this type of blind positivity that's really hurting the franchise in the first place. Like, defending Sega and telling them they're doing a good job when they haven't been doing a good job is one of the reasons why we're in the position we're in the first place, you know, despite Sega's overall incompetence. And while I understand that some of you still have faith in Sega, you just need to understand that there's so many things you don't know or don't understand that plays into why people like me don't have as much faith in Sega and Sonic Team like we used to. Like, I want to be excited for a Sonic game, but man, come on. After everything that has happened over the last few years, how can you care about Sonic the Hedgehog? And maybe for the 30th anniversary, Sega and Sonic Team will give us a reason to care about Sonic again, but I have my doubts. I would love to be proven wrong, but hey. Man, see, I told y'all this video was going to sound repetitive. Like, I feel like I'm repeating myself for the millionth time, but that's just the nature of talking about Sonic the Hedgehog these days, man. It just feels repetitive, and it feels like you're saying the same things over and over again. I feel like I'm going crazy. Alright, so what are your thoughts on the current state of Sonic the Hedgehog right now? Do you think Sonic is doing great? Which, if you have a defense for that, I would love to hear it. Man, I totally won't laugh at you. But anyway, yeah, so give me your thoughts in the comments down below. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. Again, help me get to that 1,000 subs. I've been trying to get to 1,000 subscribers for the longest time, and we're almost there. We're almost there. I'm so excited. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say for this video. Leave a comment, leave a like, and subscribe. This has been Nux, and I'm out. Peace.